All right. So let's say that they've got their first draft finished. They've reached the editing stage. Um, what do you recommend in terms of editing? Because I think that can be a little daunting. Would you bring on an editor, or is that where they would call you up? Is that where they would say, "Hey,
Sure.
Rachel, help me," or uh, how does that
Ye-
stage happen?
yes, absolutely. Editing is something that I offer because it is very daunting for a couple of reasons. One, now you're faced with all of this possibly raw information, this raw data, right? That
Hmm.
when I say raw, I mean it's got the ums and the uhs and the the side comments, etc. Um,
Hmm.
uh, it's raw, and then a lot of people don't have the confidence in their spelling, grammar, etc. So to
Hmm.
alleviate that burden of now running into that block and say, oh my gosh, now I can't finish this book because what if my spelling is wrong? That's where an editor comes in, and an editor is the one that's going to actually check all that stuff to ensure
Hmm.
that you're not going to be publishing something that's riddled with spelling and grammar mistakes, because the editor's going to catch that. They're going to catch it if you put two periods at the end of the sentence instead of just one. The editor's
I,
going
I
to
almost feel like that's a big issue people would run into when
yes.
they start typing their first page. They're immediately going to start typing sentences, and it flows well in their head. And then they're like, oh man, I don't even know
Yeah.
how to approach the grammar.
Yes, and all of that, I tell authors, don't even worry about that. All of that gets worked out in the wash, right? It all comes out in the end. An editor will not allow you to finish a product or publish a product that has poor grammar, right?
So
It's
it's
just not
almost more
going to happen.
important to just get started. And
It
is that why you
is
recommend the audio files?
absolutely, absolutely. The audio files to me are the key, because it just helps somebody get over that. In an audio file, there is no difference between the word there and there. But you and I both
Hmm.
know that there's two different meanings and two different uses for that word, and it's
Yeah.
spellings. Um, the audio file is going to write one of them. It may not necessarily be the correct one of it. But that's where
Hmm.
the editor comes in and says, okay, in the context of this sentence and what the person is talking about, which word is appropriate. And that's what it's going to the editors, in my opinion, the key to bringing the words to life, because they're going to
Mm.
clean it up and make it pretty and aesthetically pleasing, as well as proper. Proper, and not, I'm not saying that everybody has to have proper English or proper, grammar. It could be, but this is also where the author's tone comes out. Um,
Hmm.
if they typically say the word y'all, an
Hmm.
editor is not going to take that out, because that's part of their character. That's part of
Oh.
who they are. I would never take out, if a person is from the South, I would never take out the word y'all if I was editing a document, because that's who they are. That's how they speak.
I
Unless,
actually
of
find
course,
that,
they didn't
kind
want
of
that.
surprising because I feel like, some people might be embarrassed about that. They're like, I do say y'all, and I'm embarrassed to put that out there. But you're saying that's part of the character of it.
It is. It is. I don't use the word y'all in my speech, so I would take it out if I said it. But if you're from the South and you typically say y'all, and that's who your character is, I wouldn't take it out, because that's your tone of voice. And one of the things that I pride myself on is I like to speak in the author's voice. So if I'm doing an editing project, I make sure that I don't take out those things that make the person who they are. Because
Hmm.
again, we all have a story. This isn't Rachel's story. I'm not going to change the words to the words that Rachel would use. I'm going to use those words that Jonathan would use. I'm going to
Hmm.
leave those little phrases in there, those little there's things that you say that I don't, and I wouldn't take those out,
Hmm.
because that's how you speak. That's your tone of voice. And
Hmm.
somebody who's reading it wants to be able to hear, let's say your family, let's say your wife wants to read your story someday. She wants to be able to read it and hear audibly your voice. And
Ah.
and I'll give you a quick example before I have to run, actually. Um, my quick example, I was working with a young lady who was from Argentina. English was not her first language. She
Hmm.
said words that we chuckled about in our audio recordings, um, but we left them in there. We left in the little grammar mistakes that she made in her English, because
Hmm.
ultimately her goal was to leave this book for her children, because she was dying of stage 4 cancer. So she wanted her children to read the book and to audibly hear her voice in her written words. So we left all of those things in there. Ultimately, sadly, she passed away a few months ago, but now her children can read and hear her story in her words. So I think that's very valuable and very, very important.